Welcome to Noble, a network of owners, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. Here, we focus on the 5 stages of business: launching an idea, establishing a business, hiring employees, creating leaders, and then expanding your impact. We hope you enjoy today's session.
The 7 Tsunamis of Disruption. I know that sounds a little audacious, a little bold, but let me explain where I got the title from. Before I shift that way, I just want to say that one of the life verses that I've had since as long as I can remember, probably since a teen at least, is 2 Timothy 1, verse 7, that says, "The Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." I wrestled a lot with anxiety and self-consciousness, and when I was younger, and I was really more concerned about people's approval than I was from the one who made me. Well, that changed over time. It took quite a bit of time, actually. But what I really want to focus on are the 3 positives rather than avoiding fear, focusing on the 3 things we should be embracing, the spirits that he gives us, power like I don't think I really fully appreciate that in my day-to-day as often as I should. Power of the one who made all things just by speaking. That's the power we have access to, that spirit of power. Love that conquers all things, that enables us to not just love our neighbor as ourselves, but to love the one who made us. That's a really powerful love that has actions connected to it. And the last one, a sound mind. Solomon, when he was coming into his reign, he could have asked for anything, but what he asked for was wisdom, and he was blessed with that in abundance. So what I would encourage in this, as we talk through, I really wanted to set the stage scripturally and I have the privilege of doing this with Noble, where when I talk about embracing change and disruption in the for-profit world outside of kingdom-minded arenas, I'm not able to start off with that foundation. So laying that foundation of, as I share things that are both insightful, but might also provoke some thoughts about, oh, what should I be doing about that? Just remember that he's given us spirits of power, love, and a sound mind as we work through these things. So this is not meant to be something that provokes concern. It's actually meant to encourage us to tap into those resources that we have spiritually. And then I'd say one more thing. I'm grateful for Noble hosting this. So these insights that I'll be sharing with you are not directly endorsed by, or this is not Noble speaking. This is John Hanson speaking and having a platform that Noble provided. So I want to also be clear on that. All right, so here we go. Where did this come from? So the title came from when I was deployed in Iraq in 2010 to 11 with the Ohio Army National Guard. I was in northern Iraq in Mosul, and I was in a tactical operations center that had TVs all around the room. And I watched this event unfold live. So we had 8 to 12-hour shifts. And the only thing when it was slow was to watch the 24-hour news network, HNN. Well, this happened. I got a helicopter shot view of this is the Fukushima tsunami. I watched it unfold live. Didn't look like much from the air. It looked like just a tide that just kept moving forward. But by the time it hit land, it didn't stop. It just kept going. Well, the reason why I mentioned tsunamis is this. If leadership within the Fukushima community had been aware of the plates are going to shift and this tsunami is going to happen, and here's the time frame that that's going to happen, well, I think they might have done some things differently. They certainly would have done something about the nuclear reactor located right on the coast, but there would have been other things they would have taken steps to prepare in advance. And so that's what I wanted to share with you are 7 major trends that you can take advantage of or be aware of, especially in light of your business. How do you plan wisely in connection with these things that are significant trends? That's what I want to share with you. So here we go. Number 1 is we are in a relationship economy, and this is a wonderful thing. If you are an authentic person, you're going to accomplish far more going forward, and I'll have other reasons to explain this, than the companies that are a known brand with perhaps the lowest price. And I back this up with a little bit of data. What's interesting is this survey from Zendesk was pre-COVID. This was 2019. 45,000 companies, 140 countries, and they identified the top 3 reasons why consumers would be making purchases. Now remember, this was pre-COVID. And the top 3 reasons were they weren't brand recognition, nor was it based on price. It was speed and convenience and know, like, and trust. About relationships. Well, how do you trust a company? Well, fast forward just a year or so, and we're into 2020. Now, all of a sudden, this makes more sense. They could see, how did companies treat their employees? How did companies treat their customers? How did they treat the community at large? And they saw this played out in real time in a historically significant event that made it very clear which companies really did value their people, which companies really did value their customers, and which companies were aware of kind of the big picture at large. Relationships, those things matter. So when we're in a relationship economy, what I would recommend, and here's first takeaway: the people that you regularly do business with, that's a relationship. That's a customer. As I study the word out, people you regularly interact with, that's a customer. And it's especially important to do this with the ones that are your raving fans, the ones who are your ideal clients. So you might say, well, I worked with them and now I don't anymore. Stay in touch with them. So if you had someone who's an ideal client and you parted ways because time was done serving them, stay in connection with them. Just put it on your calendar to regularly stay connected with, top of mind. Hey, how are you doing? No pitch, no sale, no, who else do you know? Just stay in touch with. It's that aspect of long-term relationships, in whether you have business going with them or not, especially if you don't, that proves that it's about the relationship, not about the transaction. So that's what I recommend in this relationship economy: an authentic, ongoing, long-term, win-win relationship. That's what it looks like. And that can sustain your business. And if you're staying top of mind, odds are those people that love you, that enjoyed working with you, they're more likely to bring something back your way, sometimes without you even asking for it. Just stay connected, because quality people in your life, whether they are current or whether they are past clients, are people you want to keep around. So the relationship economy, John DeJulius has some great material on this. If you're looking for even more data-driven case studies, stay connected with him. He's on LinkedIn especially, but he's written several books about this, about the relationship economy. And that's what we're in, and that's a good thing. But we also know this: proximity does not equal relationship. And here's what I mean. You might be around a lot of people. I did a lot of in-person networking when I was first getting my business going off the ground. I went to, I don't know how many events per week. I was around a lot of people. But what's interesting about that is that a lot of those people I didn't stay connected with, and they didn't stay connected with me. So just because you're around a lot of people doesn't mean you have a lot of quality relationships. Identify the ones who are strongly aligned with your values, with your vision, with your mission, and make it a priority to stay connected with them. I don't mean just connected on social media. I mean engage with, put on your calendar, even if you need to reach out. That's what I mean. Just because you're around people doesn't mean that you're connected and have a healthy win-win relationship. The ones who do have that with you, make sure you don't take that for granted. Make sure you tap into that. All right, that was tsunami number one. Number two, millennials. Now, believe it or not, these are the largest consumer base now. And if they're not already, they're soon to be the largest employee base as well. Millennials and younger, although there have been, what's interesting, you reflect back on ancient Greece said that these young people, they need to get their act together. We've said it for millennia. So there has always been this generational view of, we have it together, the younger generation does not. So what I want to point to is, all right, if they are the largest consumer base now, and fairly soon they're going to be the largest employee base, probably within the next 5 to 10 years, then what are some strengths of this generation? What are some things we should be looking at in regards to millennials? So let's talk about some of those. First of all, relationships do matter. You're thinking, yes, the relationships where they're like this on their phone all the time. Believe it or not, if they're having conversations with people digitally, that's a relationship. Did you know that you don't know this, so I'm going to tell you. So we live right next door to a neighbor, our next door neighbor. We've lived next to them for over 10 years. We've talked to them maybe a couple times. You could count on one hand how many times we've talked to them right next door. On the other hand, I have talked with people literally on the other side of the world more than I have talked to our next door neighbor. Proximity doesn't equal relationship. relationships, conversations, knowing one another, that's what matters. So no matter what platform it's on, I think it's fantastic that I can have a conversation with somebody. I can collaborate on a document live with somebody on the other side of the world. See, I'm old enough where I can remember where those things weren't possible. Whereas millennials, they have always grown up with this. This is known to them. Technology is something they were born into, and they don't know what it was like before that. So relationships matter. Even if it's through digital platforms, they still matter. And that's why engagement through those platforms matters too. Experiences matter. So what we found in that study, that millennials, being the largest base of consumers, on some things, not on all things, but we found on some things, millennials will spend a little bit more if the experience was that much better, which means this: you have a significant advantage now. Whereas before, the companies with the biggest dollars that could outspend and have the funniest and the most engaging, outrageous commercials, they could drive more business. They will always drive business. But here's the thing: you don't need millions of customers. You only need, depending on the size of your business, a few, a handful, dozens, 20, even if it's hundreds. You don't need thousands, tens of thousands, millions to move the needle for revenue and making a difference. So if experiences truly do matter to millennials and younger, then simply, here's the key: if they have a great experience, but they don't share it or others don't know it, it didn't happen. That's the key. If there have been great experiences in this age group, then you need to be able to somehow capture that or ask them to share it. This is another thing. Because they're familiar with technology, they are more than happy to record a quick video, millennials and younger, on their phone and share it with you. You know how hard it is to get a Gen Xer like me, or especially a baby boomer older than me, to record something on video to share their thoughts. People are taking pictures of their food, for crying out loud. They will happily do it if they have a great experience with you. So leverage the fact that they're comfortable with technology. Use that to capture the experiences. Making a difference. Making a difference really does matter. You're like, wait a minute. Do you mean like, hey, everybody gets a participation trophy? That's not what I mean. They truly want to know, do I make a difference here? I know. Generationally, you might be thinking, that's not the vibe that I get. But do you know why it seems like it's hard to get younger people, millennials or younger, as employees engaged? It's probably because companies haven't done a great job of explaining, clearly showing how they make a difference, how we as a team together, when we work well, how we make a difference. Oftentimes, these are entry level positions where if it's not spelled out how you can make a difference for our company, for our team, for our customers, for our community, then it's left for them to assume, and they don't connect the dots well. They need you to do that for them. The same with a higher purpose. Is it something bigger than just a job? Well, if it is just a job, the challenge you've got is that they can probably go somewhere else and make just a little bit more money. It's a challenging work environment where staffing is tough because they can probably go somewhere else and get a little bit more. This is why making a difference matters. This is why having a bigger purpose beyond themselves actually matters. It's not just pie in the sky. It's not something where they're just saying that because they want more money. Nope. They really want to know, what I do here, does that make a difference? Because if it doesn't, if another company says, not only will we pay you a little bit more, but we have a compelling reason why you should join our team, that can win out. So simply explaining how you make a difference and the bigger picture, the higher purpose, the why, those things matter. And then the last one, collaboration. And I really mean this. Teamwork to younger people probably looks different than it did when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s. But you know what? Whether it's digital or not, collaboration is important to them, working with others. They don't like to be alone. And that's a good thing. That's a wonderful thing. Doesn't scripture say it's not good for a person to be alone? It's good that they want to collaborate. So find ways, give them ways to do that. Even if it's them as a consumer, if they can understand their purchase, their investment into your solution contributes to others, then their purchase becomes a form of collaboration. These are all strengths of this age group, which I find to be tremendously encouraging. Relationships, experiences, making a difference, a higher purpose. If I told you, apart from the age, that you had an employee that these things mattered, you might not put them at the millennials and younger group, but that's exactly what we're seeing in the data. So how does this apply to you? Here's the question you're going to have come up quite often. What does this mean? It means that stuff doesn't matter as much as the experiences. It means that what you see in generations that are one or especially two generations older, that possessions have a lot of memories attached to them, but you won't see that so much in this group. What you will see is that they want to know where my dollar goes. Is that in alignment with what's important to me? The question for you is, let me go back one more. The question is, in your service or solution, or as an employer, do you have millennials? Do you need millennials? Is it geared towards millennials? If so, these are aspects that you want to keep in mind as you're engaging with them in your outreach, in your outbound messaging. Make sure that these elements are there. Not price, not brand recognition. They really don't care if you've been in business for 50 years. What they do care about is, how do you take care of people now? How do you take care of people now? And how do you use technology? Do you embrace it? Or is it like technology? No, we don't want it. You got to embrace it because it's every day for them. All right, let's talk about my age group. Let's talk about Gen Xers, the largest segment of small business owners. Yes, if you're like I am, and our services and solutions are geared towards small business owners, and there are hundreds of thousands of these across the country. What blew my mind just 2 years ago when I started doing research into this, the SBA said that now they classify this as a small business. If you have 100 employees or less, according to the SBA, that is a small business. Now, if I had 99 employees, I would not feel like a small business, but this is what SBA says. But hear me out here. 99.6% of all businesses in Ohio have 100 employees or less. 0.4% of businesses in Ohio, flip it the other way, have 101 employees or more. Now, I know you're like, yeah, but solopreneurs, it doesn't matter. What it means is, and you're thinking, well, that seems awfully high. And it did to me too. So I thought, all right, I'm going to look at all other 50 states and I'm going to find out what's the average. The average was 95%. 95%. The lowest I could find was 92, 93%. So that means that the vast majority of businesses all around you in every state are small businesses. And Gen Xers most likely make up the largest segment of these business owners. So let's go into a few more details about why this is important. Because they're very busy. And I can testify to that. My life has stayed busy because I've gotten into more things. But just a couple of years ago, I had two teenagers in sports that I was driving to, along with work, along with family, along with church, along with so many other along withs going on in their lives. They are juggling a lot. So they're very busy. Family, business, community, charitable commitments, all those things. Here's what's important about that. No matter what you do, whether it's a service, a product, a solution, here's the question, because they're young enough to be dangerous. It's the question you've got to answer. How does your service or product make their lives easier or better? Remember, most often in this, you're looking at probably 2-income household. So their income is higher, but their time demands are way higher, way higher. I thought I had a busy life when I was single. Oh, I had no idea. Those are all things I chose to do. When I became a parent and married and involved in my community, the time demands went way up. So how does your service, product, or solution make their lives easier or better? And then the bonus is, if you and your company are aligned with their values, they would rather invest into your service, product, solution that makes their lives easier and better than a company that is not aligned, even if their price is a little bit better. We see that transcend across generational groups too. If people are more in line with values, they're going to set price aside reasonably for a little bit. They want to look first. Are you aligned? Where is my money going? How do you take care of people? This is across generations. They want to know, my dollars, particularly in faith-based consumers, are my dollars going to something I agree with? How does your service, product, solution make their lives easier and better? Because they're juggling a lot. Keep that in mind. All right. Baby boomers, these are the ones with all the money. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it. 53% of America's wealth is held by baby boomers. But here's the shocker. Not surprising though, right? Over 60% of small business owners do not have a succession plan. What am I talking about when I say succession? Here's some interesting information about most business owners, if not just about all of them, have the biggest chunk of their equity, their wealth, tied up in their business. About 90% of their equity on average, according to the SBA, is tied up in the business. That means that in order for them to have the life, the future, the riding off into the sunset, spending time with the grandkids, travel, recreation, to do all that, they have to sell or transition the business to the next generation or another company. But it's a 2 to 5 year process. It doesn't happen overnight. And just recently, last year, no, it was this year, I put together information. Sadly, what we're finding is about 70 to 80% of small businesses don't sell, can't sell. They just end up liquidating assets and closing the doors. There's a few reasons for that. And that's a little bit heavy. That's why I kind of sighed a little bit. And it's kind of heavy on me because if you built something for 20 or 30 years and your wealth was tied up into that, and that was what you pictured was going to be the thing that funded your future, well, now you get to that point and it doesn't. The number in their head doesn't match what's on the paper, and the process is more complicated. That's why if you are connected with business owners who are in this category and you have a service or a solution, or know people that have a service or solution that can help them navigate this space, the Exit Planning Institute is based up in Cleveland, Ohio, and they certify exit planning advisors, now over 5,000 worldwide. Their stats show that while the awareness of the need for an exit plan of transitioning to the next chapter in life is higher than it's ever been, actually creating and following a business exit plan is nowhere close to that. Nowhere close to that. The biggest challenge is baby boomers have a hard time letting go of the vine. They have a hard time letting go. And that's the biggest challenge they face because they built a business. They have a hard time passing it along to someone else. They care about the people. They care about the clients. They care about their team. They care about their community, and they should. But the challenge is, how do you transition from being the owner to now what's next? So let's look at that. If they have successfully transitioned, we'll go back to, if they're in that challenge, we'll go back to that. But let's say they do successfully transfer, or they worked in a corporate role, they've got retirement. What are their top interests? Now, as I looked at different surveys, and I kind of took this as not in any particular order, this is just the top 10 by average out of the interests that were listed. Health and fitness makes sense. Travel, volunteering, socializing, new technology, music, movies, cooking, dining out or coffee, do it yourself. These are like the top 10 that I was able to kind of pull from all of the surveys that I looked at. If your service or solution addresses one of these areas, then you could have a significant impact in the baby boomer world of the ones that want to. So let's do two things. Let's answer this question in one way. Let's answer this question for business owners. So how does your service or solution meet one or more of their wants or needs? And this is going to be more of a need in the category at the top. When we're talking about people's business and their future is tied up in it, how does your service or solution help meet that need? It's not as much as I would wish that there is an easy button and they can just hit the button and then move on to the next chapter in life. It's just not that way. So they really got to be able to trust the people that they're working with. And that's where the people that the circles that I'm in that are understanding there's about $15 trillion of privately held net worth just hanging in the balance generationally. Baby boomers, and who's it going to go to? The challenges are Missy or Junior, they don't want the business. Secondly, people within the business, they don't really see anybody qualified to take it over. Third is that the things that potential buyers look at the most is what's their leadership like. If we're going to buy this business, who's going to keep it running? Because if it's heavily or all dependent on the current owner, the founder, and that person leaves, they don't want to buy it. That's the biggest challenge. So if your service or solution helps someone that's a baby boomer in the transition of their business, because they're probably going to want to do that in the next 5-10 years. And there's some good reasons why they should want to do that in the next 5 years. And I'll get to that. then how does that help them? And if you do it in an authentic way, that's going to earn trust. Let's look at more at the wants though. Let's look at the things they're interested in. How does your service solution product, how does that connect with them? Again, values are important. So how do you find these? My recommendation would be find one to many. And here's what I mean. Throughout all these I'm going to be talking about, if you especially have a product, service, or solution that can be meeting a wide number of people, then you want a one-to-many opportunity. You want to find a circle of influence or a group or an association, something that a lot of people are in one place at one time, so you can speak to a large number or speak to a center of influence or to an association that has a lot of members in this category. That's what I'd recommend. If you have product, service, solution that's aimed towards baby boomers, find these one-to-many opportunities to share who you are, what you do. More importantly, everybody has, if you're in the coffee world, everybody has coffee. Everybody has health and fitness. What you want to stress are your differentiators. That could be your personal faith. That could be how a portion of your profits go to a nonprofit. Whatever it is, make sure that there's a differentiator. Not ours tastes the best. Everybody says there's coffee tastes the best. That's not it. You've got to find a differentiator that is going to be unique from, perhaps it's your story that's tied into the product, service, or solution. Whatever it is, it's got to be unique. Then find a one-to-many audience. That's what I recommend. Now, I did mention, and I'm going to keep mentioning this, there is something at the end that I want to share, and I'm saving it to the end for a reason, about a concern that I have for people in this category. And that's why I said the next 5 years, I believe, are extremely important. But I'll get to that. All right, the housing market. If you live in Central Ohio or Texas or Florida or North Carolina, like Charlotte and Raleigh, or Tennessee, like Nashville, or Ohio, let's say, Central Ohio to be exact, the housing market is in a 7 to 10 year growth across the country. I know it seems like, yeah, but costs are going up. Yes, they are, but we are still in a seller's market. And there are a few reasons for that. The next slide is going to talk about that. But this is a national trend in certain areas, in regional areas. But the thing about housing is that it supports all the other industries too. So if you have a strong housing market in a hot seller's market, what that indicates is that you also have a strong economy locally. That's a good sign. If you're in a business that service, product, solution that complements homeowners, could be also renters, but people that especially are buying homes means they're settling in. They're putting down roots in the community. So when you have a strong housing market, you also have a strong consumer market. And that's across age ranges, that's across generations. Your question to yourself should be, does anything of what I have to offer, whether it be a service, product, or solution, is this better than, is this something that can be taking advantage of a strong local economy? Also, the better question is, can it serve multiple markets? Your offer, product, service, solution, can it be airdropped into a high growth, high dollar, hot economic market? Like, for instance, Nashville, growing like crazy. Do you have a product, service, or solution? Do you know people in that market? Because if so, you don't need to limit yourself to one area. Now, hear me out. You don't want to be trying to grow in 7 areas at once. No. But if you're doing well in one area and you feel like, I keep trying, but I just don't seem to be getting traction to grow beyond what I currently have, consider another hot market. Indianapolis is growing tremendously well too, and that's just 3 hours to the west of us. Consider those things. Look at markets that are doing really well. And if you're established, but seem like you're stuck in growth in one area, consider another hot market, particularly if you know people in that market. How can you serve multiple markets? A hot housing market is an indicator of a strong local economy as well. But like I said, there's something facing housing and all of these industries, and I will get to that at the last slide. All right. Oh, I lost it. I took out the wrong slide. Okay, so I'm going to tell you off the top of my head what's happening here in Central Ohio. I want to go back to the Columbus, Ohio, and I'll give you the data. If you're really bored, I can send that to you. Here's what's happening. It's a double whammy, actually, in a good way. We already have a strong housing market, but here's what's really happening. So we know about Intel coming in, chip manufacturing property, a company right on the east side of Columbus. That's another surge of growth. because this is contributing to the hot housing market and to the strong economy, buying economy. Because when you have a major company like that, all the tier ones and the tier twos, all of the housing, all of the education, all of that on the east side brings a strong period of growth, because all of those sectors are benefited by a large company like that establishing itself. This, believe it or not, is a copy and paste of the greater Phoenix area. 20 years ago, Intel did it there. So you can see what that's done to Phoenix over the last 20 years. That's what's coming for Columbus. But on top of that, it'd be like the info commercial, but wait, there's more. On top of that, this is something I've been following for, oh gosh, maybe 10 years. So I became aware that they were deepening seaports. I know this is exciting stuff. You are so glad you came today, but hang on for just a minute. I'll explain why this is a big deal. Seaports all along the East Coast into the Gulf. When I worked for Honda back in 2014, 10 years ago, there were only two major deep water ports on the East Coast, or West Coast, excuse me, and they were owned by the same companies. They had a monopoly. Well, Long Beach, California, they went on strike. So you had ships sitting offshore waiting to get unloaded because they weren't making enough money. Well, we felt that ripple all the way over here in Honda land, where I worked for Honda as a contractor. We felt it. Well, they said no more. We're going to deepen ports all along the East Coast of the Gulf. So these Panamax ships, they're huge, 16,000 container ships, can come through the Gulf, come through the Panama Canal, through the Gulf, and into the East Coast or these other ports as well. So that these super ships, these Panamax ships, can dock and be unloaded closer to where they're needed. Because looking at the map of the US, our concentration of population is to the east of the Mississippi, not the west. So now we only have a handful left. There have been 6 to 8 ports that have already been deepened, and there are a few more left to be completed in the next 4 or 5 years. What does this have to do with us? Norfolk has a direct rail link from there to Columbus, Ohio. Columbus is the distribution hub in the north, the number one. Atlanta's the one in the south. What that means is all the goods flowing from Norfolk on this direct rail link from Norfolk to Columbus come here first, and they get redistributed out. That's why Rickenbacker went through a multi-million-dollar expansion recently, because it's a freight. It's the largest freight dedicated airport in the US here in Columbus, Ohio. The rail link from that was established back, oh gosh, over 10 years ago. Direct rail link from Norfolk to here. And that's why you see distribution centers popping up everywhere, but we're not done yet. In the next year or so, they're going to finish their second phase of the Norfolk deepening. And this is where it matters to you. Right now, they can unload one Panamax ship at a time. When that deepening is done, they can unload 2 Panamax ships at the same time. We're talking about 15,000 containers. They can unload 2 of them at the same time. That means that mathematically, in my simple pre-common math mind, that the amount of goods flowing to Columbus, Ohio could theoretically double in the next year or so. What does that have to do with anything? The flow of goods are like trade routes. Just think about like Marco Polo and the Silk Road. It's trade routes. Anywhere that goods flow, they have to be handled, redistributed, and sent out again. So Columbus is going to face 2 waves of growth. We already have Intel that's coming online in a year or 2. Then we have this surge of growth. It's not coincidental that this deepening was going to be done around the time that Intel came online. They're interconnected. The amount of, we are so recession, boy, if I could say that word, we are so recession resistant here in Columbus, Ohio, because the goods never stop flowing. And we have a major new employer that is making something that is forward technology. Chips are in everything nowadays. So it's already a seller's market. It's going to be even more of a seller's market over the next 5 years. But there is something I do want you to be aware of. And here's what I want to talk about. I want to make sure I have time for this. So we're going to talk about the Bible. We're going to talk about common sense. We're going to talk about history. And we're going to talk about data. And I'm going to do it in like 5 minutes or less. So buckle up. Here we go. Number 1, the Bible says that the borrower is servant to the lender. I think we all know that verse, are familiar with that verse. But what that means is if you owe anybody anything, then you are beholden to that person or that entity. I'll get to what I mean here in just a minute. Common sense. I was raised on Christian radio. I lived in Western New York with my family, of course. I was raised with my family in Western New York, and we were out in kind of the sticks there, where occasionally you get a few TV channels here and there, but Christian radio is what I grew up with. Could always get a signal that way. And I listened to Larry Burkett. He wrote a book called The Coming Economic Earthquake. That was back in the 80s. So that was over, my math is horrible, but that was over 40 years ago. He was calling for an significant economic decline. Well, somehow or other, we've managed to kick the can down the road for decades, but you can't kick the can down the road forever. And just like Winston Churchill said, you can't, borrowing your way to prosperity is like standing in the bucket and trying to pick it up by the handle. It just doesn't work. So common sense tells us, we know, you ask anybody, do we have a national debt? Oh, I think everybody is fully aware that we have a national debt, a massive national debt. As a matter of fact, just to say one more quote, one more piece of data. Since 2020, the 80% of the money printed in the US has happened in the last 4 years. 80% of the money in circulation has been printed in the last 4 years. Yes, we do have an iceberg where we can see a little tippy top of that, but it's the underneath the water that's the concern. Common sense tells us you can't keep kicking that down the road. It just doesn't go away. So let's look at history. Now, I have a degree in history and I have a degree in business, and I think that's helped me because I look for patterns where history and business combine, and that has led to some incredible insights. A little scary sometimes, but very interesting. The pattern that I found goes back 200 years. So going back to the 1800s, here's the pattern very loosely, and I have more details, but I don't want to go into great detail today. Global conflict, followed by a global pandemic, followed by actually a strong economic period, then followed by a major financial event. This has happened twice in the 1800s, in the 1900s, and I am convinced from the data that I have, I'm going to share with you next, that this is very likely to happen in the 2020s. So let me explain. Here we go. If I told you that I had 94.7% confidence in what I was sharing with you from data, apolitical, decades of data, that on top of history, on top of common sense, on top of scripture, if I put all that together, then I think would make for a compelling case to at least look at it. So where in the world do I get 94.7% from? Back in 2016, I go to a manufacturing conference in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I get introduced to a group called ITR Economics. They've been doing economic forecasting since the late 40s, and 94.7%, that's their accuracy rate. If they are forecasting a trend economically, then that's what their accuracy rate is across those decades. So that gives me the data to say that I'm confident that as I look at history, I look at common sense, and I look at the Bible, that they're calling for a global depression around 2030. Now, remember, I framed this, the foundation is we are not given a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So how do you approach something like this with those in mind? Well, I first do research. I did a lot of that. I spent a lot of time in prayer too. And the dots connecting for me about how can we navigate this in a way that honors our faith, but more importantly, expands the kingdom of God. See, I believe that opportunities like this, and I treat it as that, when you have something significant like this, that's an opportunity for the kingdom to advance, to take more ground. That's what I believe. And I have the pattern for that of looking at the life of Joseph. Genesis gives us a great pattern of what it's like when someone is given an idea of what could be coming, shares it with decision makers, and they take action on it, so that when those things do come to pass, they're not only well prepared, but enables them to have tremendous, wild, huge success. And that's what I'm looking to do. So all of those things together, those are the seven major. The sixth one was that of the trades of intel building and the port deepening. So the flow of goods, that was the number 6 that somehow the slide got deleted out. Number 7 is this one. This is the 7th one. And this is the one that I'd say, look at their website. They have a tab devoted to it. Take a look at it, pray about it, think about it, look at history, consider these things that I've shared with you. You have a current business and you're serving one or multiple of those trends I was talking about, fantastic. If you're in Central Ohio or maybe 2-3 hours away from, you're going to experience the benefit of that. If you're in a hot market, like I talked about a few slides ago, you're in a strong buying economy. And I believe in the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to see that return with a tremendous upsurge in growth. So I believe we're going to be facing some incredibly good economic times here in the next 4 or 5 years. It's my concern about how do we prepare for what's coming after that? And I have specifics and details on that. So here's what I want to leave you with. Here are your next best steps. Take advantage of what's coming. Next 4 or 5 years, I believe are going to be phenomenally successful. And I see a lot of economic factors pointing to that. strong consumer spending, but especially for services, products, solutions, and experiences from people they trust, from people who align with their values and who shop that way. I'd also prepare financially, personally, professionally, educate and equip yourself, inform others as you do your education, and certainly enlist the help of trusted advisors. So that's my question. My last question for you is, if Fukushima had 5 years to prepare, what would they have done differently? Well, with what I've shared with you, with these economic trends that have data to support and history and common sense and all that behind, you have 5 years, I believe, to prepare for what's coming here in the near future and what I see coming in the long term as well. And that's what I would say. Consider in prayer what you should do. And then my thought is, I got a couple things I want to share with you. Here's my 5 year game plan. First of all, I'm going to continue in prayer for wisdom. Never stop asking for that. I want, boy, if I could have wisdom, the wisdom that Solomon had, I'd be happy with just half of that or quarter of that. Just joggle the arm and get a little bit of the teaspoon. I wouldn't care. That kind of wisdom, I love that. Increase the awareness. So I'm starting to do that. I walked out the implications of this, what I call the Joseph Project informally in Indianapolis in October. And I'm putting together a game plan to be working with entrepreneurial business and church leaders to increase awareness and to be talking about potential solutions. Education. Now, I believe education is so important that I'm building a list and continuing to refine that of what I see as not only recession resistant, but depression resistant industries and opportunities. And then I'm going to be coaching entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners either for the successful exits or to prepare for the incredible opportunity that's coming, whether they want to stay in business or transition out. Then I want to collaborate with the early adopters, with the innovators, and with people who are going to take action after they've done their research, after they've spent time in prayer, and they want to say, all right, what are our next steps? And then personally, of course, I'm going to be preparing for myself and my loved ones because I believe that this is an excellent opportunity to take back ground for the kingdom. So that wraps up, minus slide 6, wraps up my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I do want to make sure I left at least 10 minutes so that people could ask questions in the chat. I'd be happy to answer any questions that might be there, or you can come off mute and ask the questions to me personally. I'd love to do that too.
Well, I guess this is more of just a comment, but it was really interesting. I like hearing about how obviously the markets we know, but the different generations, their purchasing decisions, kind of what drives them, buying power, all that kind of stuff. It's really interesting. And a lot of it made sense. And I'm like, oh, but I don't necessarily think about it that way. So I enjoyed it. I took a lot away. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. And I think I have a significant advantage being a Gen Xer because I'm like the bridge generation between there was no the internet when I was a kid, then there was dial-up. My children can't identify this clocking thing on the screen of like it's taking forever to load the video that you picked out of hundreds or thousands rather than the blockbuster that you had to return and they charge if you didn't rewind it or if you were late. The things that we've seen in the progression of technology has just been blows my mind. I love that. And I love that's a way that we can connect with people around the world.
I have an observation and maybe a question as well. I noticed when you talked about the baby boomers take advantage of those speak one-to-many opportunities. And then the millennials, it seems like, are more one-to-one relational opportunities. And I'm in your generation as a Gen Xers, and if we're the most small businesses that there are, how do you navigate those two very different communication marketing venues or strategies? Is there any answer to that conundrum?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So what's interesting about it is technology provides you a one-to-many platform for the younger people. And while they value relationships, I think perhaps even more than my generation or older, you can still accomplish it through the use of technology, through the use of social media in particular. I find that to be a way that you can get to a one-to-many for them that's also relational. Whereas and I'll put this generationally speaking, baby boomers, while a good number of them are on Facebook, that could be one platform that's a one-to-many, but your more likely to get better success with an in-person one-to-many experience for baby boomers. On the other hand, for millennials and younger, the one-to-many can be accomplished through technology, but they have to feel like you're talking to them. They can't feel like you're talking to a group. Where you can do that for an older generation and they feel included. They won't feel like that if they're in that younger generation.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, John.
Hey, Mary.
It's been a long time.
I know. I told the group before we opened up, I said, you are one of the one of the four people that came to my very first workshop in 2019, snowing in the air, and you and three other people braved the weather to come to the very first. We topped Tony Robbins, by the way. I don't know if I told you this or not, but in his very first workshop, he had 3 people. So you were the one that tipped the balance from 3 to 4. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I've been following you ever since. And it's like, I don't always get to attend events, but you know what? I do pay attention. And I was like, oh my God, I got to read John's book again. And so, but you were saying something about relational, and it is all about relations. I actually read an article, I want to say it was in Forbes magazine, and they were saying that businesses will rise and fall based off of the relationships that they have. Networking. They said the days of networking with just exchanging business cards are over, and that it's about building relationships. And so as I heard you speak with the Gen Xers and the millennials, and I'm like, it is so true, because millennials like to talk about the experience they had.
Yes.
And that is so critical. So as someone that's in the nonprofit space and for-profit space, it's all about the experience, all about it. And it's, trying to create a way to engage with people socially is something. It's like you got to learn, you have to learn how to hug people on Zoom and things that you have to learn how to celebrate in quiet. And there's so many things. And I was like, I had no idea. So hearing you today confirmed some things that I had also heard. So I want to say thank you to that. And then we've got to schedule a time to get together.
I would love to do that. Yeah. I'm more of a private person. You wouldn't believe that, right? This guy's on media all the time. But I learned that if I don't share it, they don't know it. And so it went against the grain at first, because I feel like I'm talking a lot about myself. Well, I can talk about others too. But in order for them to want to do business with me, in order to earn that trust, they kind of got to know who I am. And that's where I started sharing more about myself and what's important to me. More of like an 80-20 mix, making sure that there's enough of me there so they're learning about me, while the bulk of it is about them, about their stories, about them. But I had to share something about me. It couldn't be only about them, or they're like, we don't know who you are. And so sharing those stories helps people relate and connect. And that's something that I learned to do over the past few years, where it doesn't need to be all about them. There needs to be a little bit about you too.
Yeah, definitely. I've been one to share, and anybody that knows me knows I put a lot of my life, not all my life, but a lot of my life on social media. And people are like, why do you do that? I said, because I want people to feel like they know me. Literally, I want them to feel that way. And it really came to a fruition when, and it's unfortunate, but it happened the way it happened. The surgeon who had her license revoked last year from Powell, there were so many people that remembered that was a surgeon that did my surgery back in 2012. And it just, all of a sudden there were new messages and new relationships and new strengthening. And it was like, but it was because I allowed them to get to know me versus just don't know of me, but actually know me.
Yeah. Well said. Because that is a relationship, isn't it? And it's interesting that word in scripture about know has a deep intimacy to it when it's applied to marriage, but it also applies to relationships too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank
John,
you for
I wanted to confirm your research on the ports in Norfolk and that track with the intermodal project. Well, before we moved from Indianapolis to Columbus, Ohio, I did a lot of research in terms of looking at properties. It was in the spring of 2008, near the summer, just before the crash. And we had a small farmhouse we built from the 1900s and remodeled it and sold it. but I wasn't quite comprehending the market, what it really was. And I was fascinated that it was really hard to find a realtor. And in fact, when I called not looking for realtors, they were surprised that anybody was wanting to buy a house. And I found a gentleman that was explaining this connection from the East Coast and how the city of Columbus is the closest to 90% or some huge percentage of all major cities, which is why that Rickenbacker exchange was so important. And just 2 years ago, in fact, several years ago, as I was starting my company, I was being courted by developers along State Route 104 in Pickaway County, where the Rickenbacker Exchange has been developed now, and all the way from County Line of Franklin County to 762. There are 4 million square foot facilities that didn't exist 2 years ago.
Yep.
And in fact, the village of Commercial Point will be a city next year. And the village of South Bloomfield will also become a city next year because of population expansion. My other question, Ro, was we sold our house thinking we were at the peak. And now I have some cash available. Based on your research and sort of the next 5 years, share with me some wisdom of what would you do with $300,000 that's just available and could be invested into something. What would you see that being helpful that would make sense for somebody wanting to take advantage of what's coming in the next 4 to 5 years?
Yeah. So I would say if you have a business mind, which I know you do. So if I know the person sitting across from me has a business mind, I would be looking at what businesses could I invest into that are depression resistant. And you can also look at what does scripture say are timeless, hold timeless value, land, businesses that generate what people need, and precious metals. Now, I know people go crazy on the precious metals, but hear me out what I say by the business. You have a business mind and you have all of these business owners that are at the point where they want to move on to the next chapter in their life and they can't, but they've built a successful business. They got a great client base. They've got a good team. They're known in the community. They just don't know what's next. So a resource I'd look into, Josh Tolley, Tolley. He's based out of Houston, wrote a book called Acquisitional Wealth. I read it this year. Fascinating book. And there's others that I've seen like Cody Sanchez and others saying that there are plenty of businesses that are available for, well, they're not outright purchase, but for little or no money down to get into the businesses of takeover ownership or management of the company, then figure out a succession plan. So if I was business minded, I would look at what depression resistant blue collar businesses are available that the owners are ready to move on, but they don't have somebody within the company and they don't want to just hand it over to somebody else. They want to keep it going. That's what I would consider. I think land is a longer term play, but if you're not planning to build something on it, precious metals can be. So I would diversify in that way. I would kind of spread my risk across, and I'd look at that because I think that those opportunities are all around us, generationally speaking, and I think that's something that could be one to consider. But I check out his book; it's really good, really well done. Good. I need to make sure I leave enough of a landing strip for Megan to finish up so that we have time for